everybody and welcome to my second video all about indoor cages for guinea pigs. In this one we're going to have a look at CNC or cubes and coroplast and timber build DIY cages. If you didn't see it, then my last video introduced indoor cages for guinea pigs and we had a look at some of the main things to consider when buying an indoor guinea pig cage. We found out that many pet shop bought cages fall short of the minimum size requirements for 2 piggies. For more information on the pros and cons of pet shop bought cages and 3 examples I picked out, make sure you go and check out that previous video after this one. So CNC cages and DIY cages have been increasing in popularity over the last 10 years or so. I'm sure a lot of you will have seen amazing example photos of the cages people can achieve, and it's that kind of thing that inspires us to go away and create our own. For me, I had CNC cages going back in the past and now I've got a DIY timber build. So if you're thinking about upgrading from a pet shop cage to a CNC or a CNC to a timber build DIY cage, we'll have a look at the pros and cons of each type and I'll introduce how these cages are also built. First up is CNC cages. The cubes are wire grids which are traditionally assembled to make storage cubes, and the coroplast, also sometimes called Corex, is a type of non-toxic corrugated plastic material traditionally used to make signs. It's thought that the idea of CNC cages first came about when a guinea pig rescue wanted to find a way of housing a large number of guinea pigs in a way that was low cost and adaptable. These days you can either buy the materials and do the cage assembling yourself, or more and more websites are popping up where you can buy a pre-cut and pre-scored plastic and wire grids. So what are the benefits of a CNC cage? Well, as we just touched on, they provide a lot of space for relatively low cost. And the larger you go with your CNC cage, the more and more money you save. On top of that huge benefit, they are modular and adaptable, so there are lots of options for sizing, changing the shape of the cage and extending the cage in the future. You can get creative by adding your own levels and ramps. The materials are usually easy to source. You can also get creative with different style panels, such as solid translucent ones or even plexiglass see-through ones. CNC cages aren't perfect, however. Some guinea pigs will try and chew the bars of the CNC cage or even try and eat the Corex plastic. Building your own does require some planning, and then when you get the materials, assembling the cage is a bit more complex than a pet shop bought cage. Weak points in the Corex or coroplast may become dirty over time as urine can seep inside the corrugated tubes. If you are extending and adapting an existing CNC cage, you need to be careful to seal up any joins with tape to prevent leaks. And finally, the cages are light and could be pushed off a table, so if you want to mount a CNC cage on a table, you have to do some kind of workaround, such as having grids across the bottom of the Corex or even screwing some of the connectors into the surface below. Having said this, however, lots of the examples and the pictures that I got sent show CNC cages at a higher level and just using other grids as kind of a stable supporting base for them. If CNC cages sound pretty daunting, then trust me, they're not. Here's everything you'll need to build your own CNC cage. Number 1, 4mm wide Corex or coroplast. For my own cages going back, I used B&Q's 120cm by 60cm twin wall clear plastic roofing sheet. It can get confusing with all the different names flying around, but basically you're looking for corrugated plastic. Next up is the wire grid squares and their little connectors that look like this. You can also get these in a wide variety of places these days, from Amazon, DIY and hardware stores, and the ones that you're looking for measure 14 inches by 14 inches and they have 9 openings across on each side. Avoid the ones that have 8 openings or 5 openings, as these can be unsuitable and potentially dangerous. As well as these little connectors, cable ties are a good idea for extra stability and security. Then for actually assembling the cage, you'll need clear packing tape, a Stanley knife to score and bend the plastic, so if you're a child, do get a parent to help you with this one. And then you'll also need things like a tape measure and a pencil and a ruler. Now I will post some links to proper step-by-step instructions for how to build a CNC cage below. But basically all that you need to do is measure the area of how big the cage will be in some grid sizes, for example 2x4 of these grids, and then you measure the Correx that you need to go inside that space, plus 30 centimeters on two sides, so all four edges have little 15 centimeter sides that you can bend up and secure in place with your packing tape. You then score the plastic on the opposite side to where you want to bend it, and then tape the sides in place to finish the cage. The whole process is really straightforward, but I would recommend going with a basic rectangular simple cage before you get into adding things like levels and ramps. The other thing to consider for CNC cages, or any large cages really, is bedding. Most of the pictures that people have sent to me, thank you so much for those people on Facebook who did send pictures, have their CNC cages with fleece liners across the bottom of the cage. The alternative is using some sort of disposable bedding such as Carefresh or wood shavings or just newspaper and hay. Now, with the amount of floor space in a CNC or DIY cage and cleaning them out every week, that's going to create a lot of material that needs to be removed, and it can be costly and time consuming for cleaning. That's why a lot of people prefer fleece. However, some people with fleece also say that it starts to smell in a few days and that it's a real pain to get the fleece properly clean. Bedding really does come down to personal preference. I really wanted to include an overview of other DIY cages in this video to show you what can be done and how you can overcome some of the limitations of a CNC cage. Most other DIY cages today are timber build at tabletop height, and they incorporate some sort of plexiglass or clear perspex material in their design. Whilst these cages aren't so easy to change and adapt as a CNC cage, they are still relatively low cost compared to pet shop options. And they have the added advantage of looking super smart and super modern if that's the look that you're going for. And they're often more sturdy and durable than CNC cages and can be easier to clean as well. They're a great option if you have, say, a room in your house where you know you're going to be keeping guinea pigs in the long term. Building DIY cages is also not that difficult, however some basic DIY knowledge and tools are required. The measuring side of things is a little bit more complicated, as you have to know the thickness of the wood and incorporate that into the measurements for the size of the cage. However, if you get the wood from a local timber merchants or DIY hardware store where they can cut it for you, then this will really help speed up the process. There are different ways of assembling DIY cages, and unfortunately there aren't as many step-by-step guides on the internet. However, if you or someone you know has knowledge of drilling and screwing wood together, then there is nothing more complex to it. And as with CNC cages, I'd recommend going for a simple rectangular design before you start thinking about ramps and levels. Okay, so let's take a little closer look at my cage. Here the sides and the base are both Conti board, which is a coated timber material. We have a plexiglass continuous front panel, and then the whole thing is held up by two IKEA Bitrade shelving units. I also used iron-on white tape to conceal the raw wooden edges once the material had been cut. I've also used waterproof aquarium sealant to seal the inner edges of the cage. Lastly, we've got screws to attach the wooden panels together, and then these white caps that go over the screws. For all the materials, including the Bitrade shelving units, this cage cost about £130. I built this cage when I decorated this room, which is designated pet and sewing room. So it really made sense for me to do a DIY timber build cage, as I knew I'd be keeping guinea pigs in this room for a long time. Okay, so that's all for this video. I hope you found it useful, and if it has inspired you to look into building your own CNC or DIY cage, then please let us know in the comments. I'd love to find out what your plans are. And if you have any questions about this cage behind me or other CNC cages I've had in the past, or anything generally about building these types of cages, then do let me know in the comments, and I'll also take requests for any videos themed around that topic. So that's all for now. Me and the piggies will see you in the next video. Bye bye!